Welcome, and today we're covering segmentation, chapter 7, sharpening the focus. Hopefully you enjoyed your break. If you're not watching this before the break, that is, or after the break, sorry. If you're watching before the break, well, you better enjoy your break and get a good chance to unwind, do a bit of reading, but also do some relaxing. Okay, let's get into what we're looking at today. So we're going down the ladder still, and we're still on to understanding the consumer's value needs. So today is a really critical part of doing exactly that with understanding segmentation. So why do we do segmentation for? Well, the reason why we do segmentation is, remember, marketing is about effectiveness, about maximizing the effectiveness of what we do in a marketing context. To make that happen, we need to segment a market up so we can be as effective as possible with the segments who have a need for our product. So what we do, we divide the total market up into segments, identify which ones we can service the best and which ones have a need for our product, match the two up, and then we have a targeting and positioning strategy which follows. So the steps in the target marketing process. This is a good slide to learn for the final exam for those people doing the on-campus delivery or attending seminars. We have segmentation, targeting, and positioning. So we start off with identifying and describing market segments. Then we move into evaluating segments and deciding which ones to go after. And finally, positioning, where we design a product or service to meet a segment's needs and develop a marketing mix that will create a competitive advantage in the minds of the selected target market. Some people call this the STP process. Whatever you'd like to call it, it's one you do need to remember. It is something which understanding this will help you understand what happens for the rest of the semester. So step one of this step one of the process is segmentation. With segmentation, it is the process of dividing a larger market into smaller pieces based on one or more meaningful shared characteristics. So we're going to talk about that very, very soon. And we use the segmentation variables to divide the market up. So the segmentation variables are geographics, demographics, psychographics, and behaviour. Now, with the top two there, geographics and demographics, it's pretty easy to get the information about someone, for example, where they live, how much money they earn, all that type of thing, through census-related information, which is done through a Bureau of Statistics, like here in Australia, the Australian Bureau of Statistics. And they collect all this wonderful information about geographics and demographics, which is really great for marketers. However, the rise of social media is due to because we need to understand how people think and how they behave. So last week we looked at behaviour and how people behave as consumers. We also need to understand how they think as consumers. So we need to understand a bit more about someone in their thinking and their behaviour to really get a complete picture of how we should segment the market, but also how we can understand them as consumers. So understanding them as consumers and then being able to segment the market are very closely related to each other. Now, the book doesn't talk about it, but there is another segmentation method currently used, which is called needs-based segmentation. You may have seen that last week when we talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where there's different needs you can target as a way of segmenting the market as well. So let's go into these a bit more detail, segmenting by geographics. Now, if we're segmenting by geographics, the things to look at here could be suburb, could also be region. Climate can be important. Why, do you ask? Well, for example, if you're selling ice cream, then it might be a little bit hard to do in a cold climate place compared to perhaps in a hot climate. Country, so what country we're in, and that's related to culture, which we talked about last week as well in consumer behaviour theory. So moving on to demographics. Now, demographics, as I said, is also one of the more easy ones to do thanks to the information we get from a census. So we've got gender, family structure, age, income, and race. So we have a lot of different ways we can segment a market by demographics. There are many different things we can use here. You can focus on one, for example, Australian Pensioners Insurance Agency, APIA, as it's known, segments its market by age. So you need to be aged over 55 to be able to buy or access one of their products. And we talked about Coke Zero last week in behaviour as well, where they specifically target men with Coke Zero. So age groups, you might have also heard these terms come up about Generation Y, and for me, I'm Gen X, and of course, baby boomers. So we have also now emerging Gen Next or Gen Z for some people, which is the people basically coming after Generation Y. So it's interesting to see how these different terms apply to people and how they can be used as a simple way of segmenting or targeting a market. As an example, this is Sportsgirl. This is their website, captured a bit of time ago, but you can see how they're targeting Gen Y quite specifically. Now, psychographics is basically how you think. So segmenting the market by psychographics is good for understanding people's values and attitudes towards brands. We can do this through activities, interests, and opinions. It's very hard to do through traditional survey methods, so a lot of companies are now going to people like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Pinterest to uncover a bit more psychographic information to help them with their segmentation, targeting, and positioning strategies. So we can use VALS. I talked about VALS last week as well in the consumer behaviour lecture, which you can still access here on YouTube. So you can look at VALS as a way of segmenting and targeting and positioning your product within a market just based on these characteristics themselves. Now, segmenting by behaviour is the last variable we look at for how we might segment a market. We've got here users and non-users of products is a very simple way of segmenting a market. So based on use, who currently uses a product, who doesn't. And even if you use the product, we need to separate you into light, medium, or heavy users of a product. And even then, it might be based on a usage situation or specific occasion. So for example, Easter just around the corner, or it's just happened, depends when you're watching this video. And so for Easter, maybe you're in a family, you need to buy lots of Easter eggs for friends and family. So that might make you a user of Easter eggs, a heavy user at that, but your use is dependent upon, of course, the seasonal characteristic of Easter itself. On heavy users, some products which aren't linked into seasonal use, for example, alcohol, we have an 80-20 rule where 20% of purchases account for 80% of sales. That's changed roughly, to be honest. It's now more about 40% of users account for 60% of sales. It's a rough rule of thumb. There can be some variation to that, but it's a good guide for you to understand who you might be targeting in the future. B2B markets, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You can look at this slide just very quickly. Step 2 is in the process is targeting. So this is where you decide which segments now you've got to target. You've identified who you might be segmenting or what segments you've got to go after from step 1. And now step 2 is what segments do you actually target and how might you target them and what are the reasons behind doing so. So we need to firstly evaluate the market segments we've identified in step 1. And so you can see here on the screen, these are some of the questions you may like to ask on how you might evaluate and analyse the segment you've identified in step 1 and whether therefore you should target them here in step 2. So have a look at these questions here as a way of identifying what segments do you think you need to target, and this might be very specific to your marketing plan. So then you build up a segment's profile. So this is a profile of the segment, so you get an understanding of what the consumer wants from you as a brand. So what benefits are they seeking? What are their media habits? Are they online or offline consumers of media? Their demographics and their behavior as consumers. So what you're trying to do is build a complete profile as possible of the typical consumer of your product. You're trying to build a picture of someone, who they are, and therefore getting an understanding about how they might consume and buy a product. Based on that, you've got to choose a targeting strategy. And yes, this is a good slide to learn for sure, particularly for those people doing the final exam as part of the on-campus offering. So we have here choosing a targeting strategy. Now we have differentiated, undifferentiated marketing, concentrated marketing, and customized marketing. The approach and how they differ from each one. Differentiated marketing is we use different approaches for targeted segments. In other words, we can alter the marketing mix for each segment we are going after. So basically they get a different marketing mix applied for each segment, and that way we can create a unique value proposition with them specifically. Undifferentiated marketing, everyone gets the same. So there's no difference between one segment and the other in terms of what they get. Now, concentrated marketing, or what some people call niche, we aren't going after one segment only. We only make those people happy, so they get their own marketing mix applied for them. Now, customized marketing is where we may have tailored offerings to individual consumers. Nowadays, this has become part of what we call one-to-one marketing. So if you've heard that term of one-to-one marketing, this is how it relates to this slide here. It really is a good slide to learn, in particular, what strategy you may talk about in your own assignment in the target consumers section or the consumer section. And a bit of a case study here of each one and how it might apply in practice. And there's an example for each of the previous strategies discussed and a brand name you can look at there and relate to. So the final step in the process of segmentation, targeting, and positioning is, of course, positioning. Now, positioning means developing a marketing strategy aimed at influencing how a particular market segment perceives a product in comparison to the competition. How do we do that, you might ask? Here's the slide. So we analyse the competitors' positions in the marketplace firstly. We want to see where everyone is in the marketplace. Then what we do is offer a product with a competitive advantage. So we try and build up a product which has a unique selling proposition or a competitive advantage in the minds of the consumer. Now this is really important because in positioning is done in the consumer's head. So therefore how we do positioning will be done primarily by the consumer in their head. So we can influence that through our marketing activities. So hence why we finalise the marketing mix, because once we understand what marketing mix we need to use to highlight the value proposition of our product, so that way it comes across as a unique competitive advantage over everyone else in the marketplace, then what we can do is make sure our marketing is going to be as effective as possible, and they won't be positioned too closely to a competitor in the minds of the consumer. Now, this is leading to a bit of development of theory on brand personality, because this way we can develop a distinctive image, which in itself then becomes a competitive advantage, which really talks about the character and benefits of the brand. So we're developing a way for the consumer to identify a brand based on its personality, which makes positioning that brand a lot easier in the mind of the consumer. For example, we've got DC shoes here, which really are positioned far, far differently to, say, Nike when it comes to how the consumer may perceive and think about shoes. So to help us with this whole process, and this is one you may want to do for your major assignment. In fact, the better assignments usually do this, in fact, is you use a map or a picture of how brands might be perceived or located in consumers' minds based on the key heuristics or decision rules they may have for that product or brand. So let's look at an example here. This is one I've done up a long time ago. This is figure 7.4. So we've got upscale and downscale. This is women's magazines in Australia. Now upscale relates to how upscale do you see it? Is it very appealing to a very high-end consumer? And downscale means is it very trashy, full of lots of gossip and, you know, really bad pictures and images and things like this? And we have service, so in other words, providing lots of recipes or advice, to fashion, where there's lots of pretty pictures about what to wear this season. So what I've done is a simple positioning map to try and highlight to you how you might want to do this yourself. This has changed dramatically. There's a few new brands in there which I haven't put in because at the time I did this up, they weren't around. So it shows to you too how quickly things can change in the marketplace, but it shows where there might be gaps in the market. So customer relationship management, CRM, is a key part of doing a more customized marketing approach or one-to-one marketing approach. Because what you're trying to do is now do a very strong relationship where you can alter and tailor make the marketing specifically for that one individual consumer. So we treat the consumer as a partner. Now it's been popularized, it says here, by Peppers and Rogers. Prahlad is another person who's a big believer of CRM. Christian Grunrus from Finland is the godfather of this discipline for sure. And then we have other emerging researchers such as Vargo and Lush from the US of A with a co-creation of value services papers, which have been astronomical and how well they've been adopted and liked by people in the marketing profession. So what we're looking at here is one-to-one marketing, where we try and tailor make marketing just for one specific consumer. In other words, a market of one. It is usually possible only through the internet, where we have the ability and resources to let the consumer customize an offering they're receiving. It could be as simple as changing your cover photo or having your own picture you might use for your profile. That's a social media website letting you customize the offering you have. Another simple one is where you might sit on a plane, or even adding condiments after your coffee's been made in a coffee shop is another simple way of letting the consumer customize the offering to them. So we've got some ideas and characteristics here of CRM you may come across, such as share of customer. So in other words, how much do we have of that customer? Do they buy with us a lot all the time? And how much percentage do they spend with us compared to other brands in the category? We also look at the lifetime value of a customer. Now we have this cradle to grave philosophy emerging in marketing, where we market to someone from the very moment they're born, even before that, to their parents, all the way to the moment they're in the grave, and even after, through, again, marketing to their family, things such as wills or funeral plans. And we have two other characteristics here of CRM: customer equity and a greater focus on high value customers. So high value, don't get trapped into thinking that's people with lots of money. Value is in the mind of the exchange. So in this case, value could be as simple as how much information you get from someone, how helpful someone might be, how often they might fill out market research forms, that type of thing. There are other characteristics of CRM not talked about in the book, so you should be aware of that as well, that the book, again, is just trying to provide you an introduction to this theory, a basic coverage of this theory, not an in-depth coverage of everything discussed with CRM. So that's segmentation, targeting, and positioning. It is a really important theory. I think you should watch this again if you've had any troubles understanding it. If the lecture is still confusing for you, go to the textbook, read the chapter yourself to understand this process. It is really important to understand, number one, the need for market segmentation in today's business environment. With a changing market out there and a dynamic and fluid market out there, you do need to segment the market so you can concentrate your marketing efforts on the people most attractive to your brand. You need to know how to do that though. So the different dimensions marketers use: the segment, consumer, and business-to-business markets. Although, again, don't focus so much on B2B. I'm not a big fan of B2B for this course because we just don't have that much time to go into good detail. You do need to explain how marketers can evaluate and select potential market segments. It would be great if you could explain how marketers develop a targeting strategy, and to understand then how a firm might develop and implement a positioning strategy based on their segmentation and targeting work. Finally, knowing how marketers practice consumer relationship management to increase long-term success and profits, in other words, how they might do tailor and one-to-one marketing, is really important to understanding how marketing's changing and evolving in 2015 and beyond. Okay, well, I'm hoping you've enjoyed today. I'm hoping you've enjoyed this quick lecture on segmentation, targeting, and positioning. It's only meant to be short because it is a big theory. I'd like for you guys to understand this theory in its context and application. Well, that's it for today. This is Dr. Andrew Hughes coming to you from the 172nd floor of the Research School of Management here at ANU in Acton, downtown Canberra, ACT, Australia, the Milky Way. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.